danger.
Greetings, travellers, and welcome to episode 74 of the Innsmouth Book Club podcast. As you can see, we've brought you into the heart of downtown Innsmouth on this foggy day. We're going to be joined by a couple of guests at the Gilman Hotel. I am one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Poyton. Yeah, it's starting to look quite autumnal, isn't it, in Innsmouth? And of course, we're getting into the Halloween season, aren't we? So
yeah, that's always really disturbing. You know, you think that pumpkins are bad enough. You should see some of the things they carve around Innsmouth.
Yes, it's and the bunting's going to be back up again, no doubt, as well. That Innsmouth bunting.
Yeah.
All right. So by the time this episode goes out, because we're recording it a little bit early, we will have had the Innsmouth Literary Festival, and our guests today are also going to be joining us there, so we're really looking forward to having a chat with them. So, shall we get straight across to the Gilman House and tread those stairs? And here are our guests. It's Laura Langrish and Ivan Carić of the Key of Dreams. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, yeah,
hello.
Good, thank you.
Doing good. Funny wallpaper you've got here. I've got a bit of an obsession with wallpaper, and you seem to have something dripping down it. So
yeah, it's we booked you in the expensive room. You actually pay extra for that ambience. It's the yellow wallpaper room, and
it's nice.
Yeah.
Is it with added arsenic or without?
Yeah, just don't lick it. You'll be all right. Don't lick it. Yeah, and don't go in the ensuite, whatever you do.
Oh, yeah.
I have played that game, Alone in the Dark, and I know what happens when you go in the dark.
There you go. Yeah.
So, is this your first visit to Innsmouth?
Yes, it is. I have to say that.
You have to say that. Doesn't mean it's true.
It is my first visit. Yeah.
He hasn't been back since he was a wee boy.
A wee tadpole. All right, so perhaps we could start off, if you could tell us something about yourselves, where you're from, that kind of thing, and how you got into weird fiction and Lovecraft in particular.
So, I'm actually a teacher. I'm trained mostly. I'm originally from Manchester, but I've been obsessing over horror and weird fiction since I was quite little. My cousin introduced me to point horror books when I was sort of about 9, which was a very early introduction. And we spent a lot of summer holidays sitting with our backs against the bedroom wall, facing the door, reading horror books, and kind of fell into Stephen King and all the kind of mainstream stuff my mum happily shared with me. And then when I was sort of heading off to uni, discovered Lovecraft and slightly more kind of strange and less viscerally horror, but more unsettling, and discovered that I had a massive love of it. And then when we met Ivan, we discovered that we had rather a large overlap of books.
Yeah. I guess started with Stephen King, and I'm not a huge Stephen King fan. I think he's got a real craft, and obviously, he's influenced by Lovecraft. But I'm not a kind of huge fan of the whole kind of childhood thing. It kind of draws it out. But probably started with the Cthulhu role-playing game, kind of in the 80s. I think the second edition, the Games Workshop one, right. And then started reading Lovecraft from them and devoured it all, and didn't get it. I don't think a long time, but there was just something kind of in it that hooked me, and I love the idea of just this unfathomable vastness and pointlessness. I mean, it's my appeal to my inner goth. See, even then, and just the contrast to D&D, which I played as well, but just the hit points, kill things, or you don't want to go in there, otherwise it'll eat you, and it doesn't really matter what weapon you've got. So there, and then Poe, kind of Mackin, kind of a whole bunch of stuff. The thing I found though is that horror films as well, but the older I get, the more squeamish I get about kind of good horror films. So The Thing, I guess, was one of the first kind of really good kind of horror films that I watched.
But I still absolutely love my horror films, and he'd come to a Saturday night in a van and say, "Oh, let's watch a film," and I'm suggest something horror, and he's like, "I mean, like watch something else."
I'm the same with my partner because my brain instantly go, "Oh, let's watch this really weird Japanese horror movie." And it's just like, can we not?
Sounds much more. Can we watch Wes Anderson?
Yeah, no, I remember even the cinema when we went to see the one that's inspired by Don't Look Now. It's called Dark Water.
Yeah,
Japanese. And God, I'm hiding behind my hands.
that was a good one.
But yeah,
actually.
again, fantastically good. Yeah, no, it's inspired by Don't Look Now. Some of the imagery and stuff, isn't it? So, yeah, no, really lovely. So.
But I always tend to find that as well. I go less for body horror. I mean, back in the day, maybe it was because of the birth of, or the SFX were getting better, but it was, oh, look, that guy's eye popped out and that kind of thing.
It's like all the old, Italian
Troma
things and
films and all that
Troma,
stuff, yeah.
and Fulci and all that. It was all eyeballs, wasn't it? Eyeballs and maggots. That was the whole Italian sort of au revoir, really, wasn't it, of horror back in the 70s?
A lot of a move away from that again now, although you can still obviously find it because you can find anything you look for now. But things like with The Quiet Place, like that tense, that 90 minutes of literally gritting your teeth because you're as on edge as the characters are, and bringing that atmosphere, that's a huge kind of step in the right direction, I think, for a lot of modern stuff. But
still a disappointingly small amount of really good kind of Lovecraftian sort of inspired film that kind of capture that. I think The Thing is one of them. I think Mouth of Madness is another one, which is a bit, it's kind of a bit out there, but it captures a little bit of that kind of feeling of cosmic horror and the stuff that I really love. So it's just often a disappointment.
I'm going to say that the first Alien film.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, actually spot on.
The Benson and Moorhead films, I think, the recent memory, they're the sort of the best sort of cosmic horror.
Yeah, the end really captures that. That one was
Endless and Resolution. I mean, because you kind of have to watch them both together, right, to understand what's going on. And it's great stuff.
And one of the few films where they do something interesting with time travel, where it just doesn't, you don't just what.
Yeah, no, it's very clever.
So.
Yeah.
And what was that film with the guys in the forest? Was it The Ritual?
Yeah.
They're in Sweden.
The Adam Neville
that was
movie.
Yeah.
That was all right. Yeah.
Because that was not showing so much, was it? The monster does kind of appear at the end, but it was
he was well done when he did, which helps, because so often it's like we've talked about it before with the M.R. James adaptation of the Mezzotint.
Yep.
And you got that at the end. It was just like, oh, come on.
It was fun, though.
It was fun. It was fun, but that just completely. They should have just left it at the hand coming over the sill for me. The big reveal just kind of.
Yeah. There was a film we watched. Rory Kinnear, Men, which was I don't know if you've seen it, and it's kind of a folk horror vibe. It's Lovecraftian in that it's this utter sense of madness, and you've got one person who's in a house, and every other person that they interact with for the entire time they're there is Rory Kinnear in various different guises, and it just becomes utterly terrifying. And there's no
what's that?
It's called Men.
I'll have to check that out.
Rory Kinnear plays all the male.
I've not seen that.
Yeah, and we went to see it at the cinema, and I left with a sense of, what the heck have I just watched? Like, I don't think I ever want to see it again, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. So were you both into gaming, RPGs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, Ivan much more so than me. You'd been involved heavily from uni, whereas I'd kind of hit D&D at the point that 4th Ed came out, which was probably a bad time to discover it, and didn't really enjoy it that much, and thought this is a stupid thing. And then I discovered Pathfinder, which was like D&D 3.5. Quite enjoyed that, and ended up running it for a bunch of friends and had a lot of fun. And then when we met, there was this sort of half-hearted, I'll run Cthulhu for you. And I'm like, that would be great. So we got a group together, and then, people drop in and drop out. But Ivan was running the Horror on the Orient Express, and it was just phenomenal. And it was like this entire other world of roleplay opened up to me, and a different way of experiencing kind of that I normally only get in books, and actually having some agency in that world, as much as the Orient Express is very kind of linear in many respects. It's literally
quite literally, yeah.
You still have that sense of some agency, and so
No, I love it. I mean, I've started one, I fancy role playing, D&D first edition, D&D first edition, AD&D first edition, and all of the kind of games are just ridiculous sort of stuff, tables and tables of monstrous things. The Middle Earth role-playing game, which is like a cut down version of Rollmaster, which has minutes, where you have to roll every time you do anything, and it's like I think at the bottom of the table, I remember it's if you trip over, it's you roll a 1 out of a D1000 or whatever, D100, and you trip over an imaginary deceased turtle or something. So, the most amusing thing about it, but just stretched out games. And then a little bit more Call of Cthulhu, obviously. And I was a huge fan of Roger Zelazny, the Amber books, which I read are just fantastic. And there's a role-playing game. And it was my first kind of exposure to systemless. I mean, it's diceless rather than systemless. A role-playing game. Well, how the hell does that work? You can't do anything without rolling a dice. What the hell? And I ran that at York, actually, at university, and that was a bit of sort of an eye-opener as well. That's kind of, and Vampire, of course, Vampire Masquerade, which I should probably keep quiet around, but again, there wasn't anything like it at the time. I mean, it's over the top, it's kind of luscious and gothic and kind of teenage angsty and all this kind of other stuff, and often quite painful, but tell me about it. But there's something about not being embarrassed and just kind of going with it, and I love, again, it's kind of a film, Crimson Peak it's called, isn't it?
I enjoyed that. That was fun.
It's just over the top. Yeah. It's luscious,
every gothic trope you can think of.
Absolutely, and there's a joy in it, and sort of stop being embarrassed about it and just have fun. And then we're kind of mid-campaign or close towards the end. I sort of stopped 3 years ago and he's kind of finished it. But Orient Express, which is, I love it. It's really brilliantly written. It's just it's a travelogue, and I'm half Croatian, and my favourite bit is there's sort of a dream kind of sequence, and it doesn't really serve any purpose beyond being an atmosphere and the players potentially all dying or going mad, which is set in Zagreb in Dream Raza, and it's mentioned. I know you kind of are fans of Thomas Ligotti, but it's based on a short story of his, the Journal of J.P. Drapeau, which I probably
nice.
And that's the inspiration for that. And it's just full of these kind of mad little vignettes. There's like a battle between mice and the frogs, where they're kind of firing cannons at each other and stuff. They're all dressed in uniform. It's just like crazy stuff on this kind of cobbled streets in Zagreb. And I love that, the kind of the detail, an obsession of mine, just the kind of links between things. And I haven't mentioned the word apophenia yet, but I will do. But it's that kind of, wow, that's connected to that. And those costumes and Napoleonic sort of 18th century and that kind of stuff. I absolutely I love that stuff. And I need to go back to kind of more role-playing reasons. LARP as well.
All right.
Used to do a chunk of LARP. Haven't done for many years now. I'm not quite.
I keep trying to get him to come back.
So it's the field.
Yeah, I don't do LARP in fields anymore, though. I only do LARP in nice buildings.
Yes.
As you get older, right? You don't be traipsing around in mud. Yeah.
I'll happily go to a pretty building with a bed I can sleep in, but you tell me to get in mud, nah.
There's a friend of mine actually from York University, and he came to Locksmith's Dream, which is our kind of current thing that we're kind of doing before kind of Key of Dreams. And he told me about this moment because he stopped going to LARP as well before I did. And he said, yeah, I went to this LARP and it was raining, and so my tent was washed out. So I thought I'll go to a B&B and then come back the next day. And I arrived at the B&B and I thought, this is quite nice, actually. I don't have to go back. And I just felt this tremendous sense of relief. So kind of what we're trying... Well, it does sound like he's in prison or something, but what we're trying to do with kind of Key of Dreams Locksmith's Dream is kind of provides, I guess, a sort of a LARP light experience for people that don't want to kind of
fully commit
commit and just be somewhere really nice and not kind of have to kind of worry about that. But having said that, I love LARP as well. Not kind of being mean about kind of LARP, because there's kind of a joy in that as well. But it's also, as you
I
said,
think
to
most
get to a
of
certain age.
Ivan's experience of LARP was very big fest systems,
Yes.
whereas
Yeah.
Right.
I tend to play small, like no more than about 100 people, and that's my top
The
end.
gathering.
So I like very little, and maybe it lasts a day or a day and a bit, and it's quite intense. But then you can get a lot from that because you can do a lot of horror type stuff. Like one of them I played was actually based on a William Gibson story, which was fantastic, and it was really creepy, and it was in a not airsoft, but like laser.
The laser tag. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But it was, it was all very kind of modern, just hallways. But the whole thing, just the setup was great. And the kit requirement was literally you were in a blue boiler suit or a red boiler suit. So you were two obvious sides. But all of the weird stuff that was going on throughout the day and the madness and people coming back from the dead. And it was just superbly done and freaky. But then, I drove there, I did it, and then I came home and it was great.
Yeah.
So it decompressed nicely.
Because I'm guessing with the more the sort of fantasy LARP stuff, that's quite an investment as well, right? With all the kit and everything else.
Yeah, and there's and it's kind of people growing up. I guess it's the same sort of deal with films, superhero films, that kind of stuff. I don't know. It seems that so many conversations kind of in the 80s when I was kind of a fan, kind of with people like, oh, well, they didn't do that right, or they kind of copped out. Whereas now it's kind of the fans that have kind of grown up and they've got the money and they're either writing the films or directing them or involved in it. And it's the same kind of with LARP. People have money. So whilst obviously you get people coming in, there's a huge amount more traders doing stuff. There's a big overlap with historical reenactment as well, with kind of that sort of stuff. And there's just a lot more money in it for kind of good and bad, really. So and
I think a lot of people are starting quite young, because certainly a lot of people like us who have been doing it for a long time, and our other partner who goes, and our kids go, so they're now 12 and 13, they're growing up in that, so and they love it. So it's one of those things that they came along when they were little because it was, or they were little and you package them along because that's what you do. But as they've got older, they've chosen to go back, and they love it and are really involved and desperate to be involved with Key of Dreams and stuff. And we keep saying to them, no, you're not old enough yet. But they're absolutely.
That's interesting, because I'm involved in martial arts, and most of the young people now coming into martial arts will go into HEMA or something like that, or similar lines. So historical European martial arts, which again, they have all the correct gear on and everything.
It's a complete tangent, but do you know a chap called Mark Gilbert? He does a lot of kind of historical, kind of sword fighting, kind of teaching. Anyway, he's based kind of down south, but I know he does a lot of that sort of stuff, and I know he does kind of teach a lot of HEMA stuff as well. So anyway.
Tim, weren't you told off at LARPing?
I was, yes, I was, because I got into it through reenactment, because I was in a pirate folk band. Right, we'd turn up, we'd play all these events, we'd sing dirty sea shanties, and they'd get me involved in the battles to make up the numbers. So they taught me the reenactment style of combat, right? Which you go for it. And then I went to we were doing the same sort of thing down at Lulworth Cove for a big pirate LARP. So I went in all guns blazing, and I got pulled out. Just like, stop trying to kill people.
Well, it doesn't sound like you were doing it to be mean, but we do know a historical actor from the Sealed Knot, and just belt you around the heads, and he says, "Can you put your blows a bit?" Well, no, you should be wearing a helmet. If you're not wearing a helmet,
all I know about the Seal Knot guys, because I lived in Dudley, and they used to do the big battle at Dudley Castle and all the rest of it. Yeah. And one of my mates was involved in that, and he'd come back and he'd have knots on his head where he'd been walloped with something, and split lip, and basically they'd just go and have a big punch up in a field. That was pretty much it. It was basically like two sides. They'd blow the whistle, they'd have a fight, and that was basically it.
Fancy dress fight club.
Well, these days it's probably cheaper than going to a football match, to be honest.
Yeah.
Price of tickets these days.
By the time the whistle finishes, you're going to have a pint with the people that you were just fighting with, and it's all fine.
Yeah, that's exactly. I remember when the health and safety brigade turned up, and they were like, "Well, you can't do this, and you've got to stay behind these flags, and you can't do this, the other," and none of them listened. It was still turned into a bloodbath.
So, Key of Dreams, you've mentioned there, and this is is this quite a new project, or is it developed from an older project?
So it's new in terms of this thing on its own. We've done a previous one, which is this is us having kind of grown up, I think. So our first one, which was The Locksmith's Dream, which is still running, was our first kind of foray into this immersive, interactive, theatrical world. So really hard to describe, and we struggled so much with trying to describe what it was to anyone, because it's not an escape room, but it has puzzles. It's not theatre, but it has actors and performances. It's not just a weekend away in a manor house, but you do get to go and stay in a manor house and eat gorgeous food. So
Nice.
there's lots of things kind of all thrown together, but it's a way of telling stories. And we learned a lot doing Locksmith's Dream, and Locksmith's Dream's been great, and we've loved doing it, and hopefully it will keep running. But Key of Dreams I think this is really our passion project. So this is very much based on kind of weird fiction, on the works of Lovecraft, Machen, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So taking some of those stories, and the idea is that we've got that Lovecraft, all of his stories came from his dreams. So much of what he wrote down were snippets of dreams that then became his stories.
Yeah.
So we're taking the idea that dreams can fall on fertile ground and become stories, or be transplanted into fertile ground. And the space
Nice.
that the house inhabits is where these stories grow. And you can come and then be part of the house and put those stories together, find out how they grew, who was involved, who shaped those stories, and then be involved in finishing those stories and how they change, so there's a real sense of consequence as well.
At the moment, it probably sounds a bit like some sort of workshop, but it isn't. Again, this is the
Let's listen up.
difficult thing to describe, because I know
You're going to be playing the
Yeah,
learning game.
that's it. Because there's a lot of European LARPs are going to be quite common, where there's a lot of discussion about how the story is going to develop and how your kind of role in it, and that's completely kind of fine and kind of great. But
Not what we're doing.
But not what we're doing. The idea is that you can, well, buy a ticket, rock up, dress in sort of 1920s costume or kind of themed if you want or not, and then just kind of start the experience and learn. It's going to sound a bit pretentious, but learn kind of the grammar of the experience. You know, how does it work without having a rule book or a character sheet or anything like that? So you turn up. The house is just amazing, and we've looked at kind of other venues, but it's this 17th century kind of manor house in Wales. We don't own it, sadly, but it's gorgeous. It sleeps 22 people, 23 people. You arrive kind of in this strange kind of house. There are actors there that you can role play with or not. You can. There are things for you to do, to investigate, to kind of puzzle through. There's lots to do. And you kind of pick something and you kind of follow the threads, and you come to realize that everything is connected or might be connected, which is the whole kind of apophenia thing. I love the layering, and Lovecraft does this. He'll kind of drop in into a historical context, a name of someone he says is an academic, or a particular book or whatever, put it in the same place as kind of the real stuff. It's that sort of layering of kind of history and imagined history. So you kind of almost, you feel like you could scrape the paint, the patina, and underneath you'll kind of find something else. So much so that kind of in kind of previous experiences, people are just kind of looking around, kind of peering at kind of objects and stuff. Because what we take the physical place, and then we use what's actually there to try and kind of link stuff together. And that includes music. So we had a composer compose for each of the different rooms a different soundscape, which again sounds awfully kind of pretentious. But I mean, they're basically kind of tunes, kind of music, historical stuff from the 1920s, spoken radio, a lot of which is deeply freaky. And then there's things and clues embedded in them. And a lot of this stuff is designed to make you feel clever. And that sounds a bit patronizing, but I promise never to say this, but I say it every time. I'm not a huge fan of puzzles as such. I love the feeling that you get from puzzles, from that kind of connection where you go, that's what it means. But you get that in books where you realize the plot. You get that in films, you get that in role-playing games, you get that in a board game where you say, that fits together with that. It's that bit of magic, that little bit of delight where you go, there's a connection there. And you get that with people as well, where you kind of say, oh, you went to that thing as well. And that's what we try and do in Key of Dreams, what we're going to do in Key of Dreams, it comes out next year. But what we've done kind of in Locksmith Stream is to build all of these kind of elements that you can just kind of pick up and then connect. And I know that sounds still kind of a little bit vague, and I'm trying to kind of think of a concrete example that we have. Actually, Mezzotint. You mentioned kind of Mezzotint. So that was the inspiration for a series of puzzles. And a little bit of a spoiler, but not kind of massive ones. So we have these drawings that are kind of in the Mezzotint sort of style. They're punch cartoons, kind of draw, and they change. A butler comes and changes them every half hour. Oh. So people walk past and they kind of look, does that picture change?
That's cool.
Someone might catch him at it, but it's not a problem if he does. And they say, what are you doing? Well, it's 8:30, so. But it changed, and there are clues in there. There's a story that's actually told through it. There are different kind of characters woven in. And that's the sort of thing, is the environment changes around you, but we're not using technology as such. We're not doing anything kind of massively fancy, but it's the attention to detail. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I think there's that link with some of the Lovecraft stuff and the Lovecraft circle of writers who kind of shared and embedded things in their own writing, and that sense of it becoming more real. You know, the Necronomicon, now we all know that it's a fictional thing, but at that point when it's been written about by 5-6 different authors and someone else has mentioned it, and you're like, is it really made up? Like, is it true? We tried to get that sense by taking some of the real stuff. So if you came away from one of our events and something had stuck with you, you could go and look it up and you would find enough truth in it to make you wonder.
That's
nice.
That's
and
nice.
I've had joy with like genealogy and stuff, and again, obviously genealogy and family history was a big thing for Lovecraft. So one of my starting points of developing the stories is to take the house and the family who have owned this house and trace the family back. And I got back as far as 1066. So with this one family, but there's a period of about 300 years where they all were, the sons were all called the same thing, and they all married women with the same name. And then the genealogy records are a bit weird, and they've got confused because, you know, so you've got John is married to Anne, and then 100 years later, you've also got John married to Anne, but it's in the records, it's the same Anne, and she's now like 150, and she's married to his great grandson. You're like, that's obviously not.
That's very Azanathwaite, that is, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, exactly.
So there's lots of gaps to play with and have lots of fun with. So
yeah, it's like Charles Dexter Ward and thing on the doorstep, all that kind of stuff on it. Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a lot of I think the interesting thing with stuff like the Necronomicon is it's taken on its own life, you know, and we say this quite
yes.
What's at Harvard?
Did
Harvard get like bombarded with people asking if they could borrow it?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a copy in Harvard and in Brown, and
it's a line that made me crazy. So I'm complaining about kind of films and stuff, but the Dunwich Horror, the 1970s version, it's all kind of psychedelic. But I can't remember who it is that plays it, but he goes in and he says, "Can I borrow the Necronomicon?" It just it's an ordinary kind of library. It's just the line. It's the only line I remember from the film. I remember the psychedelic stuff again. I just remember that. I remember being deeply offended.
It's the rarest book in the world that everyone has a copy of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I like the thing about the puzzles as well. So I mean, Tim, you play a lot more sort of video games than I do, but there's been some good, I think, puzzle video games. But you get those ones where the puzzle doesn't feel like it's attached to the game in any way.
Well, a great example for that is the Resident Evil games. They're the sort of most incongruous puzzles on the planet. It's like to get into a room in a police station, you've got to find 6 different pyramids or 6 it's busts, isn't it? It's like busts, and you've got to fit them in the door in the correct order. Why would they do that?
That's exactly it, and that's the thing that drives me I mean, it's fine, it's a mechanic you understand. Again, that's the grammar of the game, is that, you know, pyramids or busts are how you open doors. That's just how the world works. It doesn't really make any sense, but that's kind of it. But yeah, it's the giving you kind of a bit of logic and the puzzle making sense, but more than that, the puzzle not necessarily not necessarily making you feel bad when you don't kind of get it, because there's multiple ways to get it. So, for example, if you know a lot about Lovecraft, this particular puzzle, you can probably answer it straight away. That's kind of fine. But then there's another 1 or 2 ways to actually look it up that we just need to do a little bit of legwork.
Yeah. So
each person feels clever if they've kind of solved it, either by, oh, I know what that is, bang, or I followed this trail and that's kind of what got me there.
Yeah, and the experiences have definitely kind of 2 parts to them, but the first part during the day when people arrive, it's learning that is a thing. So being able to look at a clue and go, yes, I can answer that. That's great. But someone else is looking at it going, well, I don't know that. What do I do? So there's then like a second part to it that is all, if you go to this place, you can find that. So if they want to go running around this sprawling manor house, they can absolutely do that. And that's great. And then you can get the answer. And the other one is that we provide a book, which is sort of a source book, but also a notebook. It has lots of information, in-world grammar stuff, glossaries, some random stuff as well, but a lot of it is all very useful. And if you really don't want to go running around, you can sit with your book for half an hour and you'll probably find the answer in there too. Nice. So
we're going to do something similar with we're going to put give people a book called the Commonplace Book, which was something that Lovecraft kind of in there, and that'll be full of stuff, quotes, all kinds of kind of interesting stuff, some which are relevant, some which aren't, some of which might be kind of parts of kind of puzzles or stories, all the rest of it. But back to the things being appropriate, it's because I'm kind of obsessive about this stuff, which probably hasn't come across. It's the same kind of design principle with the food. So this thing, it's a 7-course banquet, and I didn't want the food to be, well, the thing that you get at Halloween, which is lots of fun, right? You know, this is a bowl full of eyeballs. You know, they're peeled grapes, or these are worms. That's cool and it's fun and I love it. But there are kind of courses and stories and kind of puzzles woven into the dishes, and it's like a 7-course thing. The chef comes out, he presents kind of the dishes, he gives you a little bit of kind of spiel about it, and then you kind of have it. And we're going to do some really magical stuff. Got some fantastic ideas. Blue tongues is all I'm going to say for Key of Dreams. I think there's.
I mean, you said about not licking the wallpaper. This man is obsessed with the idea of licking wallpaper.
Yeah. Anyway, so really
makes a change from toads and stuff.
Yeah. Well, you lick the wallpaper after the toads, obviously, because that's why you're licking the wallpaper.
That's where I've been going wrong all these years.
That's it. Stick your tongue on the spawn of Sarthogua. You're going to need to lick something else, aren't you?
You'd think.
But I like that idea with the puzzles as well, because then it's less like, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm sitting an IQ test.
That's it. Yeah, it's like being on I don't know, a kind of a quiz team or something, and just everyone being clever or having the knowledge that you don't. And that's the bit I don't like about puzzles. And maybe it means I'm lazy. But yeah, it's being able to capture that spark without a lot of blows. And that's not to say, I mean, there's a process people go through kind of in Locksmith Dream when they come, where it's just, oh my God, there's just too much to do and I don't know what to do. Bewilderment. And you need a bit of that, to be honest, but it's having the step from bewilderment to, oh, I could do this, needs to be relatively short, because if the bewilderment lasts too long, then some people give up and some people knuckle down, but you don't want anyone.
It's kind of where our characters and actors come in as well, having characters of the house. So for Locksmith's Dream, we have a curator and the chef, there's an inspector, there's a bartender, there's a butler, and they're there to kind of facilitate that experience. But it's not like you have to go and push a button to get a hint or say, I don't understand, please help me. You're chatting with these people anyway. And through the way they interact, they're going to drop hints. They're going to drop bits of story and give you breadcrumbs to follow without feeling like you've been patted on the head and said, there, off you go that way.
And you're going to develop a feeling about who they are and whether they're trustworthy or not as well. So we've got a character in Locksmith. We're going to have Randolph Carter in Key of Dreams, actually. Looking forward to that. But,
nice.
He's called Hatch, and he's the barman, but he never serves any drinks. And he's a bit sinister, and he's probably not entirely what he seems, but he does this thing where he comes, I can help you, but tell you what, why don't you tell me, give me a memory, maybe something from your childhood, something you lost maybe that was precious to you. And he just collects these memories, and it's lovely. And some people are very transactional. And again, this is really good because you do it on your own terms. You say, okay, I'll give you this memory. Fine, give me the coin. Okay. And he says, well, it's a little a little bland, but a deal's a deal, and it gives you a thing. And then you get people coming back again and again and again. And the nighttime portion of the experience is different. People behave differently at night. They're wearing masks, and things really kind of ramp up. But there was this lady, and she came back again and again and again. And in the end, she had this audience around her, and she was telling this story about how. So tell me about a moment of treachery. Yes, well, as a child, she had a cat. She had 2 kittens, and this might need to have some sort of content warning. And then she found out that her mother had accidentally killed one of her kittens. As a child, the kitten ran away. And she only found this out 20 years later in an argument with her sister, where her sister was trying to deflect blame something she said. I bet you didn't know our mother killed our cat. So you've got treachery, you've got trauma there, you've got kind of everything. And she's
grandstanding at this point.
Either
being centre of attention.
It's a made-up story, but she's got to the point where she's kind of just relishing this thing with this creature that's obviously just. Anyways, his smile kind of like a gesture.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Like she got wrapped up in that gothic sort of sensibilities, it's just like treachery and death and family secrets. It's all again, it's back to the tropes, isn't it? But you've got that sort of like through the environmental storytelling you've got going on. That's really clever. Yeah,
it's easy to fall into it because of that, because it's not a stage. It's not a modern hotel that we've dressed up. It really is a 17th century house that, it's let out, but it doesn't really feel like it's moved on from the 20s when the family were there. And it's just very beautiful, but also there's a real tell of when we're packing up. And at the point where we're going, is this ours or does it belong to the house? And you're like, can't tell anything.
And the guys, again, it's the you're not kind of put on the spot. So it's not like perform. In a role-playing game, if people aren't in character, they're kind of ruining the game for everyone else, right? But you do it on your own terms. So they got to that point where they were kind of telling these stories. And we've got kind of mums and stuff that kind of chaperoning. We've had 40 or 50% of the people that came from the States or for abroad. And the first time they've been outside the country, not kind of the mum, but, sort of 22-year-olds. And the mum's kind of come to be a chaperone, and she'll sit and she'll do a few jigsaw puzzles and kind of thing. And then by the end of the day, she's exchanging dirty stories with kind of Hatch. And she's kind of role-playing. I'm not entirely sure she's ever role-played in her life, but she's having a whale of a time. And it's this kind of moving from a state where you kind of feel kind of safe, but in an slightly unsafe environment, which is almost kind of a contradiction. And you feel kind of safe to experiment, kind of to do stuff, to role play, to kind of fiddle, to.
And it's trying to get that natural buy-in to the suspension of disbelief. Like, obviously, you've walked in from 2023. You've just come in. You've still got your phone. It's obviously not the 1920s. However, once you get there and everything around you isn't using modern technology, the people are slightly out of time and seem a bit odd, and everything you touch is genuine. So there is no implementation of technology visibly. So there might be a few little things, and especially with there's definitely some quite exciting stuff coming with Key of Dreams, but it's not like if you go into an escape room, you've got to fit something somewhere and it doesn't work first time, and you're like, is it working? Have I got it wrong? Oh, do I just need to move it? Like, there's none of that. If something happens, then it happens and you respond to that. And that's like Ivan was saying with the paintings changing, the butler does it. There is no trickery or magic there. It's just that the butler's part of the house. So it's very easy to just get swept up in this world and feel part of it. And once you get to that evening section where everything changes, and it does, we change the lighting, we change the sounds, the characters act differently, the guests have got masks on and they're all given lanterns because the lights are turned down. So you're now exploring this dark house, and there are whole sections of the house that we keep hidden away. And that sounds like a mad thing to be able to do, but there are sections of the house that are just not visible during the day, that we then make available and visible in certain circumstances in the evening. And people were genuinely blown away by this. And it was so exciting to have people, and you'd hear them from somewhere in the house going, "Oh, that's exciting." You're like, great, we're winning at that point. And then I'll go back to going and telling someone off, because that was the role I was playing. But it was just amazing how a lot of people came either to support a partner or to support a younger person, and they got into it as much as everyone else. And it's, for us, that's a joy of kind of bringing weird fiction and those ideas to a wider audience, because not everyone who's going to come will have read Lovecraft or Gilman. I mean, I suspect a lot more might have done for this, but there were certainly people that came that had no idea or interest in the original IP, but came because it was immersive, because it was in a beautiful house. And then they get that sense of story.
You shouldn't have to know that stuff. I mean, obviously, that's part of the reason for being kind of interested in it, but you shouldn't necessarily have to kind of know that stuff. That the kind of the vibe and the atmosphere and the sensibility, I guess, is what you're kind of providing. That's kind of a little bit unique. So
it does sound incredibly immersive. And I mean, we've had murder mystery dinner parties, we used to get the big box games. That was the thing back in the 90s, I think. And I've been on a couple of murder mystery weekends, generally fairly dull. One was just a police procedural, really. And you sat there and watched this police procedural unfold, and then you had to guess who the murderer. There was no real involvement. So it does sound incredibly immersive in that sense as well.
We tend not to script stuff particularly either.
There's a little bit,
there's a lot of depth of information. Our poor actors get given like a 40-page document to read and inwardly digest and know the stories. But there's very little of the actors acting at each other or scenes that are scripted, because that can be a little bit cringy, especially if you go to like a murder mystery thing and you're just sitting and watching them.
Yeah, and it was very much. Well, I'm the son of Sir Henry, and I was in India, all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit. So on a practical level then, how the hell do you get all that together? I mean, a mansion, and it's kind of mind-blowing.
I said I was 50, but actually I'm only in my early 20s. But so I had this thing called an apophenia index. You'll be surprised. It's a bunch of interlocking systems, I guess. I started off by trying to do this in a really inefficient, stupid way, by documenting every single step, figuring out what the branches would be, who needs to do what, and that just broke. And so I went mad for a month or so doing that. What worked a lot better was you've got stories, you've got actors that perform particular functions outside the stories, but that still fit. To your point about you're not trying to stick a pyramid into an actor or a bust and something there. It's appropriate. You've got someone, Randolph Carter will be kind of there as an old dreamer, collecting kind of certain kind of objects or certain stories. That will be, it will make sense kind of in terms of that. So they've got a game function, I guess, kind of out of it. You've got puzzles that you can kind of do that make sense. So if you've got jigsaw puzzles that have particular kind of stories or things associated with all that kind of fit together in a particular way, everyone understands jigsaw puzzles. It's a particular sort of technology. You've got maybe locked boxes where you need to find the keys, and there's kind of a puzzle associated with that. Then you've got trails and kind of breadcrumbs, which are the stories. So it's almost, the effect we're trying to get is you're almost treading in the footsteps of the characters that were there before. And you could go around a corner and they could be there. But we don't do a lot of that when you're acting out and you see a scene. A little bit, but not kind of quite that much. Because there's the magic of the place. So you're reading about some terrible murder that happened in a particular room, and there's the level of detail. So the wallpaper, and it's the last thing they saw was the lily that's on the wallpaper, and there was the smell, the wood smoke sort of smell, kind of the fire, and they looked out the window and they saw the tree, and you build up kind of these elements, and then they're actually in that place, and it's like, you can't help but get a little involuntary shiver because all of the details are right. And you know what happened here. So when you're investigating that kind of story, not only is it a puzzle where you've got the clues that you kind of know, actually, if I look behind there, that's probably where it is. But you've also got this unpleasant, creepy thing happened here, and I'm here, and it's dark, and I've got a lamp. So there aren't really jump scares in that way, but people do jump because it's kind of that. So it's layers of kind of puzzle mechanics, kind of game, and then kind of atmosphere and character.
Putting it all together is a bit kind of sanity draining, to be fair. We do have this massive spreadsheet, which Ivan termed the apophenia index, but I hadn't visited the house before we ran our first event. And I did a significant amount of the writing and producing of puzzles. So what I had literally was folders and folders of photographs that had been
organized
taken
by room,
of the house, organized by room and by floor, and then where each clue needed to be, where it needed to take you next, how you were going to follow that, where this bit was taken, where this part of the story would have happened. And I lived it for like 6 months of writing. And the team got there on the Monday, and they had a week before our first event to kind of get to know each other, set their characters, make sure they knew where everything in the house was, set everything up so that we were ready to welcome people in. And I rock up on the Friday night, having been teaching all week, and I get there and I walk around the house for the first time I've ever been there, going, there's a clue missing there, there's a key missing there. And they're like, how do you know this? Like, I've lived it. And it's that sense of being in a Lovecraft story where you get somewhere and you've never been there except in your dreams, and you know where everything is. That was me.
But weren't we saying just the other week, because myself and Tim and my wife organising the festival, all having festival dreams of various types, you know.
Yeah. It was really funny. It was like when he said it, it was like literally that morning, because I had a sort of nap, a mid-morning nap, and I just dreamt about trying to find somebody at the festival. Somebody I needed to be in a certain place wasn't there, so I was running around trying to find them, and the clock was ticking, and I was panicking. You know?
As long as you haven't dreamed that Cthulhu awakens and drags us all down, then we're all right.
Well, yeah, this is it, isn't it? Well, I do it with when I'm writing my fiction. The amount of times I'll be dreaming about what I'm writing, because I'm similar to Lovecraft in that respect, as I get a lot of my ideas from my dreams, because I have really vivid dreams. I'm one of these weird people that likes nightmares. I really enjoy them. Yeah, and I get up and I'm like, oh, but it's always like 4 a.m, right? And I don't want to wake my partner up. So I'm running around trying to find a pen and trying to scribble something down on the back of an envelope in the dark or something, you know.
Sorry. One of the things I love is running Cthulhu. I was just talking about this kind of Scribble and Dark, Horror Nordic Express. And one of the things I always wanted to do, and I never kind of quite managed, is when all the characters die, kind of in a campaign, to basically give their notes to the next bunch of people, because then you've got this kind of insanity scribbled notes, and as campaigns go on, generally people get madder and madder, and they just kind of start writing, filling whole pages with like a single word and underlining it each time. And it'd be lovely to be able to take your notes, or kind of the notes kind of from the game, and just give it to a random person and say, here you are, interpret this. Logic.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant.
When I get an idea, if I'm on the computer, I've got a couple of accounts on Facebook, which not sure you're supposed to have, but anyway, so I'll message myself. And I thought, if anyone ever reads those messages, there was
I think you're a right nutcase, wouldn't they?
Yeah. How long does it take to bleed to death if your hand is cut off? Check. That kind of stuff.
Your best one is your note you'd left yourself in bed. What was it, 10,000 horses? No context.
I woke up in the morning on my notepad, it just said 300 horses. To this day, I have no idea.
That's amazing.
No idea what was going on there. That's going to be the title of my autobiography, I think.
I love what you guys were saying about the there's no specific jump scares and things like that sort of built into it, but people jump. I mean, that to me proves that you've engaged the imagination, because that's that thing you do, isn't it? You freak yourself out. You know you're perfectly safe. You're down the end of the garden, right? It's dark. It's the middle of the night. You know you're in your garden and nothing's going to happen. But because you could like what was that noise? Ooh, there's something out there. You know, I freaked myself out really badly as a child. It was about the first time I'd read Algernon Blackwood's The Willows.
Nice.
And I was staying on one of my uncle's farm in Shropshire near the River Severn. And I'd gone walking. It was sort of dusk. All these willows drooping around. And I freaked myself out.
And again, that's the thing. It's apophenia, and there's another word that I've kind of forgotten, which is the actual physical kind of seeing kind of patterns. Our brains are wired to pareidolia. Thank you. To see kind of patterns, to see human faces, you know, in objects, in the curtain that's kind of whispering there.
Well, I wrote a story about that called "The Face in the Fabric," and it was people seeing the Cthulhu's face in the towels and things like that. And,
but that's very M.R. James as well, right? Which most James stories are the crumpled bed sheets or something.
Yeah. Well, Oh Whistle, great example. Yeah.
And the place is in Wales, is that correct?
It's a house called Trewin.
In Monmouthshire, and kind of quite near the border. So we play with that as an idea as well, that it's on the borders of England and Wales, but it's also on the borders of the dream and the real world.
A house on the borderlands. There we go. Yeah.
Macon territory, eh?
Macon. So tangent, sorry. Macon, born sort of 20, 30 miles away from Trewin.
Yeah.
Randomly, the guy that owns Trewin is friends with the people that live in the house that Macon grew up in.
That's amazing.
The woman, Claire, who played the housekeeper for us at our ball events back in March, her friend is the guy who runs the Macon Appreciation Society. So
nice.
It's one of those moments where everything just kind of slots into place. Again, with researching the genealogy of the house, it turns out that one of the sons of the house in the 20s, or late 1800s and into the early 1900s, married someone from Providence, Rhode Island, and is buried in the same cemetery as Lovecraft.
Right.
Why would that be there?
Connections.
Because that was something I wanted to ask, because the first thing when I looked at the title on your website, the first thing I thought was, well, that's half Lovecraft, half Macon right there, because you've got the key, obviously the silver key, and then you got Of Dreams, the Hill of Dreams. So my brain instantly went, oh, Lovecraft and Macon, you know.
Winning.
yeah, exactly.
And that kind of throwing in a bit of Charlotte Perkins Gilman. We'd not actually read Yellow Wallpaper until fairly recently.
Right.
And one of the things about Trewin is that it has a huge amount of William Morris wallpaper.
Oh, nice.
Everywhere. So I've been having joy playing with the wallpapers and building puzzles, hence the whole licking wallpaper thing.
I just thought you had a kink.
You've got to see what it tastes like. I mean, right?
Whatever floats your boat. We're not here to judge.
You see it everywhere. And having spent all this time looking at the wallpapers, we went out to cafes and suddenly there was William Morris cushions, and you go out and it was like on a poster, and I'm like, it's everywhere, it's following me.
And some of the stuff it looks unpleasantly fleshy, and certain lights as well. It's kind of there's an organic quality to some of the way more
there's one of the
a bit
rooms
unpleasant
that in the locksmith stream we light it green at night, and it's got this very busy green wallpaper with birds and fruit in it, and it's quite pleasant but just very busy. You light it green and it is sinister as anything. When I'm acting in it, which I do on the weekends, and I get to play the character who spends all their time in that room, which is the room that we light green, that has random 1920s spoken word and weeping on the soundtrack. Like, I've got a pencil by the end.
Nice. That sounds intense.
Yeah.
Great fun.
So when is this is going to be launched next year, you're saying? Are you going to be running it? How often will you be running it?
Yeah, April. It depends on how well we do. I mean, so
the problem is not owning the venue. So
sure.
We do need to book. So the thing we do, and at the moment, the way we're selling, we've got a date for April. We've got 2 dates, in fact. We usually try and run a midweek and a weekend event when we book. and we can run 2 midweeks if there's a lot of interest. But then we're taking bookings or deposits for later in the year and asking people what are their preferred months, because for us to book the venue, obviously that ties us in. If we then don't get enough people to make that work, and it's not even just about the financial side of that, but actually if you've got an experience that's for 25, 30 people and you've got 5 people rattling around in a giant house, it just doesn't work. So, and we've been lucky. I mean, we have...
So we sold a quarter of the tickets so far, but the idea is that if we get to 50% kind of ticket sales in the next sort of month or so, then we'll just announce more dates, because then we know that we can we can sell them out. And we're hoping to run, I mean, we've run, I think 7 Locksmith of Dreams so far, and we've got another 4 this year. So we're hoping to run 10,
right?
I think,
wow.
I think between 10 and 14, kind of hopefully, that we can actually run.
And it's been... Locksmith Dream has been phenomenally well received. You know, we went into it really quite unskilled. Dan came from corporate. I'm a teacher. This was not our thing. We love weird fiction. We love writing, but it's never been something we've done. We've never commissioned an artist or a composer or hired actors. Or written a menu for lots of people. It was all this, and it's a very small team. It's basically us in the shed and our partner Marianne, who does an awful lot of making of things for us.
And then there's kind of a virtual team of kind of puzzle designers and kind of helpers that we kind of get and stuff. But no, it's a
so yeah, it was very, very naive, and we went into it with it's got to be good, like that's
absolutely.
It's got to be good,
absolutely.
And we got there and we ran our beta event, and it was fantastic, and we learned a lot, and we walked away from the beta going, we need to change that, we need to change that, we need to change that, we need to fix this.
But there wasn't very much.
But it was all little things, and it was polishing, and it's had great reviews.
We got covered by the stage.
That was really cool.
Proper Ponty and everything.
Oh, wow.
So, and there's not been a single person that's been that hasn't loved it. But it's not cheap, and it's not a cheap experience to go and spend a night in a fancy manor house with 4 meals, actors that are 1 actor to every 4 people that are there on the experience. You get your book, you get badges, I say badges, they're beautiful enameled pin insignias. You get lots of lovely things. And everyone who's been says, absolutely, it's worth what it is. And other people we've spoken to who haven't been yet, but we were saying to someone, a puzzle designer actually, who said, I was going to say it's very reasonably priced. I'm like, for what it is, yeah. But people still look at it and think that's a lot of money to spend. But it's fantastic. And I 100% believe it's worth it. We made this wonderful thing and everyone says it's great. And now we're making a new thing that's based on something that we love so much.
And it's got a bigger audience. I mean, the marketing and the publicity is the bit that's a bit of a dark art, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys...
esoteric.
It's well, you can spend your life on social media doing this and that, and you get 2 likes and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm convinced that the algorithms are some kind of weird voodoo. I'm not sacrificing the right amount of chickens or something to get them to work in my favour.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time. Almost as much, if not more time, actually making posts for social media, contact people than I do on the creative side of things that I want to work on. But
well, it sounds like it mirrors our experience of the festival, really. So we kept that to the 3 of us, and again, we're trying to. It's more than you just turn up and you watch someone talk about weird tales. You get a goodie bag. There's badges. There's this. There's that. There's these little experiences. It's trying to. Yeah, it's trying to make something that people will remember, isn't it? I think
that's it. Yeah, no, absolutely, because it's about stories. I mean, everything, whether it's a day out on the beach or whatever it is, kind of with kind of friends or something that you went to see or just a funny thing that happened. It's about stories that you can then tell your friends and your family kind of after, and that's how it lives on. That's kind of life. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's like for with the festival, I've been obsessed with the visual because the way the world goes up, I keep saying to Rob, it's got to look good in the pictures because you know that it's going to be all over social media, right? Because that's the way of the world. So you want it to look good in the pictures. You don't want like a half-empty room of people sitting around looking bored, do you? You want them to people to look like they're having fun, because that's the way marketing works these days in the world of social media, isn't it? It's all on people's selfies, Yeah.
It is so hard to capture that for real, and for us, we've had photographers a couple of times, and we've got photographers coming again. But at the point that someone's solving a puzzle, they're bent over a box, and you're like, well, that's not a really great photograph. I love it. And then they work something out, and they run away to go and chase the clue that they've just done. You're like, oh, well, okay, they've got. How do you show people that that's amazing?
Yeah, it's difficult. You've got to do some sort of video, I guess, but how do you encapsulate that experience in? Yeah, it is a tough one.
They disapprove of you excavating heads and kind of showing the inside of heads. So they don't like. I like it. I like it. Yeah.
Have they got their own little cemetery there, like a lot of those manor houses?
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
No, but one of the jobs that I had to do on my very first, I was not expecting. There were two unexpected things. I had to fix a electric fence during the beta, and the second was that someone came and they were sort of, oh, it's a dead bird. And I went, and there's a bird, like a giant fluffy bird. It wasn't dead; it's just fallen out of the nest.
Baby pigeon.
So I had to kind of take it and kind of put it back into the nest, and I kind of put it in upside down because the other bird looked grumpy. And I read somewhere that you're not supposed to touch them, which isn't actually true because then the mothers don't come back. But it's not actually true apparently. So I've just got this photograph of like a bird like this glaring at me, and then some feet kind of.
Although to be fair, the lovely couple who told us about that, we kind of came to say thank you for letting us know, and they were given a cocktail token to say thanks. Sorted out. But the way the guy who was playing the bartender said, are you the couple who told us about the birds? And they said, oh yes. And he said, thank you, it was very tasty, and left.
Nice. Oh, bravo. Yeah. You can just imagine the face, like, what?
That's really good. Yeah.
That pate you had at lunch.
There's a little feather stuck on the corner of his lip.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It sounds like an amazing experience. I mean, I really hope it works out for you and takes off. It's an incredible thing. And I love it when people have a passion for something and then you do it. I mean, me and Tim are both involved in different things, music and whatever. And it was a quote someone said, as a creative person, you often get used to saying, oh, right, okay, a lot, because every week I get, hey, we're setting this great band up and this, and you're, oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
yeah. So to see people actually doing stuff is really nice.
It's just trying to find the time when you're a small team, and you guys must know this as well, when it's just you or a couple of you working on something, there just aren't enough hours, and there are so many good ideas and things that you want to do that you just don't have the time to do.
Yeah, and I think that this is keep being told off for this because there keep being side projects, or one of the things we're looking kind of to do, kind of started doing, is collaborating with other people. The idea being that we kind of build, in the same way that kind of Lovecraft with a lot of the writers, kind of a world around this. So there's a director called Leo Dalton who does immersive kind of theatrical experience kind of in London. He does something called Come Bargain with Uncanny Things, which is there's these strange kind of creature and you're supposed to make some sort of deal with it.
It's an interactive immersive opera. It sounded amazing.
That's bonkers. That's
I mean, cool kind of. Yeah. Anyway, so we're talking to him about doing an immersive kind of play in London as an experiment. So the auction of Randolph Carter's possessions, kind of, for example. That kind of as an experience, you get kind of a couple of hundred people kind of through it. It acts sort of as it's got to be a good thing on its own, but it's sort of an advert for the other stuff as well. And it pads out the world. They kind of cross over. The other thing kind of we're kind of looking at is doing an epistolary kind of experience where you subscribe, for kind of a tenner a month or whatever, and you get sort of a letter and some nice ephemera, and it tells a bit of the story, but it fills up again around the Key of Dreams. So for people that
again will be in that world, and
that's a nice idea.
Story that won't necessarily be totally prevalent or told in the main experience, but that you get that sense of making the link. So if you've read it, you come to the house, you kind of go, oh, that's where that happened. Or if you've been to the house and then you read it, you go, oh, that makes sense now. So
that's nice.
So this is my brain again with the video games. You've gone into doing side quests, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's precisely. But I do it with when I'm writing fiction. I don't know if you guys are the same. I'll be in the middle of writing something, and then I'll get a really good idea about another story.
Yeah.
So I'll go off writing notes, and then I don't want to go back to the thing I was originally writing because I was like, but I don't want to do that now. I want to do this. But you've got to make yourself finish what you'd started first.
It is really difficult. Yeah.
I regularly tell Ivan off for exactly that thing. He's like, oh, we could do this thing. That'd be really cool. And I've just contacted this person. I'm like, please stop. There's no more time.
The collaboration with the gin distiller that hasn't come to anything yet. Sort of bespoke Lovecraftian.
I know. I have to get told finish what you're doing first before you start the new one.
Well, we were a bit like this with the festival, weren't we? Oh, we could do this. Oh, and we could do this. And oh, we could do it was just like we got to a point where it was like, right, we just need to stop.
I think our ultimate dream we were saying last time, weren't we, was to hire one of these museum villages, you know, where they've kept the village like an old mill village and turn it into Innsmouth for a weekend, you know. That'll be
Bliss Hill, Bliss Hill, or Portmeirion, or you know, all these kind of places.
It's probably ferociously expensive, Portmeirion. Though Portmeirion will be amazing, though.
Portmeirion will be incredible, wouldn't it?
I think it looks run down enough to be in.
You don't think so? No, I've not been for years.
It'd be good. It'd work in a different way because it's still got that weird, uncanny vibe, hasn't it? Because it is just so bizarre. It's like all of a sudden you're in like Italy. It's just like, what's going on? It's a bit like a fever dream, isn't it, Portmeirion?
Yeah.
And also in
absolutely.
Wales as well, funnily enough.
Indeed.
A lot seems to be happening in Wales.
Well, we seem to have been very lucky as well. I mean, Wales is obviously renowned for its rain for most of our events.
Shut up. We're there in October. Be silent.
Lucky. We actually even had snow once, which was really cool.
There's an amazing photo that I kind of took. There's an apple tree covered in golden apples, covered in snow.
Oh, yeah, it's on your. I saw that one because I was looking on your website before we came on. Yeah.
That's not fake. That was genuinely there.
It's magic.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, I see the sun is setting over Innsmouth, and our bus driver has just pulled up outside, so it's time for us to depart. Of course, as guests, you get to stay in the Gilman House overnight for the full experience. Whatever you want to do with the wallpaper is up to you. Personally, I wouldn't go near it, but you know.
There'd be tooth marks on the bed.
There is a heavy dresser you can put up against the door because, of course, there's no bolt. But thanks very much for coming in and visit. As I say, it sounds like a great project, so we really hope it goes well, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for this visit. Now, we're coming up to Halloween season, as we said, aren't we, Tim? So I think we're going to be covering some Halloween-specific stories over the next few episodes.
Indeed, yes. Something I wanted to do last year, because it's basically a yearly ritual for me, is in October, I like to get out Roger Zelazny's A Night in the Lonesome October. So yeah, we're going to be covering that at some point. It's it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's absolutely tremendous. It's bonkers. It's just everything I look for in a weird tale. So yeah,
but that's definitely coming up. And beyond that, we're talking about doing a season on Lovecraftian TV, because it's not something we've covered in detail yet. So what we're probably going to do is Tim and I will choose a program each, and we'll get some guests in to choose a program or a series as well. So that'll take us up to Christmas. So that's the plans for the future. We're also looking at doing some more patron bonus things, perhaps something that we're going to call Innsmouth After Dark, which will be patrons chatting with Tim and myself, but we'll get details of that up all in due course. Speaking of patrons, thanks to everyone who has supported the show. Thanks to everyone who's subscribing on YouTube as well. If you want to support the show, please go to our Patreon site, where you can sign up at 3 tiers of membership. You get a quarterly copy of Innsmouth News, free entry to any events we do, and bonus content for the Innsmouth Book Club and Strange Shadows. Big thanks again to Laura and Ivan for coming in. And with that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.